Welcome to We Are Human Leaders. And because you're here with us today, you're part of a movement driving change. Each conversation is an invitation to grow, to question, and to co-create a future where people, business, and society flourish together. And we, Alexis and Sally, are here to guide you on this journey, to connect you with big ideas, bold conversations, and brave questions that will help you live and lead more human every day. We have another amazing guest today with us, Lex. Can you tell us a bit about who we're chatting to?
Yeah, today's guest is Stephan Meier. So he is the professor at the Columbia Business School, and he's here to talk to us about employee engagement. What was really fascinating about this conversation is Stephan's ability to combine what the data is telling us around employee engagement with some really tangible and practical things that we can implement into our workplaces to really create places where employees love being and it inspires the most out of them. What did you love about this conversation, Sal?
Yeah, I think it's that real reframe of kind of, the customer is always right, the customer centricity to kind of
Yeah.
focus on the employee as being the sort of the center focus and how that actually creates win-win-win outcomes at all layers, including for the customer.
Absolutely. And it's a critical reframe, I think, in 2025 to be successful in business now and into the future. We know that the face of work is changing and that generationally people expect different things from work. And I think Stephan really highlighted some of those differences and gave us a bit of a blueprint around what we can do about that.
Absolutely. And he's the perfect person to be talking to about this. Not only is he incredibly warm and lovely, he's also one of the world's leading experts on the intersection of behavioral economics, corporate strategy, and the future of work. So really dynamite conversation.
Absolutely, Sal. So this is Stephan Meier. Let's dive in.
Welcome to We Are Human Leaders, Stephan. It's so wonderful to have you with us. And we're really excited for this conversation about so many important topics that are really at front of mind for people-centered leaders at the moment in work. Now, you've said the future of work is human-centric. Can you tell us what you mean by this, and how does the research support this statement?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And yeah, it's interesting. We're talking today a lot about AI and technology is taking over, and maybe there is nothing left for humans to be doing. And I personally think that, what is clear is that there is always going to be human machine interaction. So every human is going to work with a machine together. But I think we're over indexed a lot on the technology part and forgetting that, in the human machine, there is the human. And that's what I mean with kind of the future is kind of human centric. And if you don't take the human into account, first of all, the human and machine interaction is not really reaching its full potential. And also the adoption is probably getting, is lagging quite significantly. And I had a really interesting conversation. I wrote a case about Morgan Stanley using AI in their wealth management. The head of AI at Morgan Stanley said this quote, which I love, which is that tech is easy, humans are hard. Uh, and I think over time in history as well, if you think about the investment in IT in computers, it took decades for the investment actually to reach the full potential and productivity. And I think the reason being that we forgot a little bit about that there is humans and we have to work with those humans, and the humans are really hard. And that's what I really mean with the future is human centric. If you really want to use the leverage and reach the full potential of what technology and the future of work can be, we really have to put the humans in the center. Otherwise, nothing is really going to move the needle much.
Such a wise insight, Stephan, because I think there's so much focus and talk about AI as this kind of magic bullet solution to so many issues. And I think in some ways we almost over assume, I think that tech is this easy solution that will somehow mean that we don't have to focus on the complexity of humans. But I think there's an opportunity when we sort of reframe that focus on focusing on the human first, and then allowing technology to perhaps support that or to augment rather than technology as the sort of central focus.
Absolutely. I think like what is interesting, and like in the conversations I now have a lot with executives about this, I ask them sometimes, I actually talk about a think about a pizza chain. What is the benefit of AI for a pizza chain when it comes to labor? And most executives, their first intuition is getting rid of people. They're like, what is good about AI is, eventually they can make the pizza. So robots can make the pizza. They definitely can take the orders, and then we can get rid of people. And so their first intuition is just replacing human beings because they think they're in the pain in the butt, and we have to get rid of them. Instead of thinking, how can we actually augment them? How can they do better work? And I'm coming quickly back to the Morgan Stanley, where they really think about the financial advisors. How can we use AI to augment them, so free up capacity that they can actually do work that humans should do, and is more value enhancing. And I completely agree with you, Sally. We're thinking about, AI is going to do everything, is going to be solved with AI, and hopefully it's going to solve cancer and climate change. I mean, it would be great if there's this potential, but we need the human beings to actually get all the real work done.
Stephan, it's an interesting point, this one around freeing up human beings to do the work that we might do best. And I don't think our listeners will need much convincing when it comes to this idea of putting human beings first. But can you help us understand a little bit more? What are some of the benefits of an employee first workplace?
Yeah, I think like the benefits for the firm, and I mean, in my book, I mean, I do think it's also the right thing to do, but I also want to make the case it's actually a business case. It actually helps organizations thrive. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get it moving if it's just like that's the right thing to do, but it costs us
Moral
stuff.
imperative.
And I think the benefits are at least fourfolds. It like really increases productivity through like engagement and motivation that goes up. It helps with innovation. If you don't have a people first organization, innovation is just not taking it full potential, especially nowadays where it moves so fast. It's the people who are agile. If you talk about we want an agile organization, that's the people they are. So that's the second one. The third one is like people are staying longer, so turnover goes down, and that's a huge cost saver. And I think the fourth one is if the employees have direct contact to customers, the customer experience. You don't get happy customers with disgruntled employees. You kind of need happy employees to have happy customers. So at least those four are like significant benefit that will show up in the bottom line. Maybe not immediately, which makes it hard. It's an investment in the future. So you have to invest in that experience in order to get the benefits a little delayed, which makes it sometimes not so easy for leaders to do, especially if you live like quarters to quarter or like, but I think it's in order to be competitive in the future. I strongly believe that only the employee-centric organizations will survive.
Such great point, Stefan. And I think it's really also what I'm hearing is this kind of reframing of humans away from being just resources that we think about in sort of quarterly terms to the sort of full potential of the human, which can take sometimes, those months or years to really manifest. For example, you mentioned, reduced turnover, and that might be something that you only start to see, a few years down the line. But the multiple benefits to that, not just in terms of not having to hire, look for and hire someone new, but the retained knowledge and know-how that you have, and the impact that has on sort of culture from a longer term perspective is enormous too. So these are four very compelling components of the business case. And you mentioned the sort of relationship between employees and customers, but you've also said that employees are the new customers, which is such a great phrase. We'd love for you to unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons why I think the employees are the new customer. And, but by the way, the the title of the book, which very few people get, it's the employee advantage in two ways. The employees create an advantage, and the employees also have some of the advantage. So I think there is a shift, and that's now leads to the employees are the new customers. We reached like customer centricity. That was a trend. Before we were product centric, and then customers kind of quote unquote gained power. Because there were a bunch of trends that led to that. There is more transparency about the customer experience. There is more data about customers so that we can personalize. Um, there is, more need for the customer experience because competition increased and preferences of customers changed. And I think the same trends are hitting the labor market as well. As I mentioned before, agile are the people. So in order to be innovative constantly, we need human beings. The experience, the employee experience, there is more transparency. Like the Glassdoor is kind of the TripAdvisor equivalent. And if you screw up with your culture, it goes viral. And can actually affect how you attract talent, and we also have more data about our employees, so we can actually start to thinking about personalizing the experience of the employees as well. And last but not least, it's the same human beings who want like brand with purpose, and that their consumption is aligned with their values. Those are the workers as well. So I think that is one aspect. The other, how I think about employees are the new customers. We have so many tools in customer centricity that we now can apply one-on-one in thinking about our employees. So let me give you an example. Like if you would ask a marketing executive, is it a good idea to ask your customer once a year how they're doing? They would laugh their asses off. They was like, of course not. We need to constantly know what they're doing, and we have those tools, focus groups. We have customer journeys, and so on and so forth. And now we can apply those and thinking, what should we do with our employees? And a lot of organizations do still those annual engagement surveys, which everybody ignores, so nobody fills it out, and it's a shame. And I think we should and we can use kind of the same tools from customer centricity to apply to employee centricity. So that's what I mean with employees are the new customer. I also sometimes think it's easier to convince leaders that there is win-win. When we think about customers, like, well, customer centricity is not lowering the price. It's actually improving the experience for the customers, and then I can make more money. So the customers are happy, and I'm happy. And so the same logic applies for the employee. I can make them happier, or the experience of the employees can be better in order for making more profits, going back to the 4 benefits that I mentioned before. And so they're real win-win, and not this either or, where we think like, well, it's either the shareholder or the employee. No, you can actually get both. And we did it with customers.
And Stephan, I'd love to know from the work that you've done, how does this apply to small and medium-sized businesses? Where have you seen this employee first sort of ideology play out? Have you got an example that you might be able to share for us and its impact?
So there is like one organization that I love. I've for full disclosure, I've never been in the firm, but I talked to some of them. It's a grocery store in Texas. It's called H.E.B. And they're very, very employee centric. So they really care about their employees, and this is not a tech firm, there's a grocer. But they care a lot about their employees, everything they do, about their careers, about recognition, about thinking about the social relationship they have. Everybody in Texas loves that firm. I mean, they're very, very successful financially, but they also have this dedicated following. So in the book, I actually explained that they opened the store in outside of Dallas, and people would line up overnight to be the first people in that
Wow.
grocery store.
Wow.
It's like as if they would handing out Taylor Swift tickets for free. And so because they're really, really dedicated
Yeah.
customers for that grocer, and I think their big success is what they do with their employees, and they do literally everything you could imagine, in thinking very carefully about the careers they're having, supporting them, recognizing that what their lives are, they're supporting them when they're natural disaster, and this is not a big firm. They're actually focusing just on Texas, and I think that's an amazing. I personally like that. It's also an alum of Columbia who is now the president there, so that also helps.
Love it.
But yeah, they're very dedicated. They really, really care about their employees, and they're extremely successful.
And quite fascinating that their customers are willing to line up overnight. I think that demonstrates the downstream, of putting the employees first is obviously winning business, which is,
Yeah.
A positive impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely. I mean, a good example, but much larger, is Costco, which also is an employee. I would consider an employee-centric firm, and then you can see the benefit of the loyalty that the customers have. Allow now Costco also to have like private labels, where the margins are much higher because they really dedicated. They love Kirkland, the Kirkland brand. And so absolutely, they're like direct benefit on the willingness to pay of the customer, and as a result on the margin that the firms can make.
What I also love about the H.E.B example, Stephan, is that there sounds like quite a conscious decision for them to stay a certain size. And particularly when I think, companies experience a lot of success, there's this sort of natural tendency to always grow, to go bigger, to sort of expand across all, for more states. But for them to sort of see that, no, that's not actually in alignment with our values, and that's actually going to potentially do a disservice to our employees and then also our customers, I think that's quite a courageous decision in the current economic climate.
Absolutely. I mean, there is always this tendency of we have to grow more, and
Yeah.
this, especially when, I mean, they're a privately held firm. If you're publicly traded, the pressure is even more extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I completely agree with you, Sally. I mean, that happens very often. I sometimes think, that's what happened with Starbucks, for example, who were actually pretty employee-centric. That then led to that third place. People actually wanted to stay there. There was the vibe in the stores that is not coming from just the furniture there. It's actually the baristas and the people who work there who created that atmosphere. And I think they lost it now. They scaled significantly, and that might have been a good financial decision for the founder and somebody who had stocks, but they're in trouble. I think they're much more in trouble, and I think the reason is they kind of lost that, how the baristas create
Totally
that
agree.
feeling in the coffee shop.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Stefan, the concept of quiet quitting, which sort of that term came to the media, I think, sort of around the pandemic, and we're seeing this kind of like mass exodus of people. But actually, you've pointed out that this is something that's gone on for a long time, and I have to quote a Homer Simpson quote that you've used, which is that if you don't like your job, you don't strike. You go in every day and do it really half-assed. That's the American way.
And the Australian way, I must say.
Yes, I think that's the human way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes also use the quote, before quiet quitting, there was Microsoft Solitaire. We were like phoning it in for years.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, not everybody was, but if it's a very engaging and a motivating workplace, people would not quite quit, whether with solitaire or phoning it in, or otherwise. But unfortunately, many do. And if you look at like Gallup engagement numbers, they're depressing. Where 60 or north of 60% of Americans are disengaged at work, and that number is even higher worldwide. And that's not just a pandemic thing. That actually happened for many, many years. Because during the pandemic, they're like, well, maybe it's the pandemic. I think the pandemic put it maybe on top, put a bright spotlight on what was not working well for a long, long time. And yeah, we were phoning it in for, or some were phoning it in for a long time.
Yeah.
And so in this context, what do you think, what would you advise a leader who's really looking to drive engagement and that kind of lean in effect that we want to see for employees?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. So, where to start as well. What would be the first thing to do? So, uh, one thing I really think is important is like listening to the employees. What works well and what doesn't work well, and take then those ideas and go forward. And on that front, there is another quote which I like, is like, so Amazon, which is not a particularly employee-centric organization, but very customer-centric. So what Bezos once said is, what is great about my customers? They're always dissatisfied. Even if they're happy, they're very dissatisfied. And that's amazing because I can always do better. Now, there's very few leaders who would exchange customers with employees. There are very few who would say, what is great about my employees? They're always dissatisfied, even when they're happy. But I think the same logic applies. We can actually do better by listening what's happening on the, with our workers. What is frustrating them? What are like stuff that are in their way, and starting to improve on those dimensions. I just the other day I read an academic study who looked at a baker in Germany, actually, where they ask people. They have very bureaucratic rules, and so they ask their employees, so tell us like the most stupidest rules that you have, from like stupid to like very, very stupid. And so they took the two most stupid rules and eliminated those. They actually did a real experiment. So for a control group, they kept the rule, and for a treatment group, they removed those two that the employees themselves isolated as being very, very stupid and frustrating. And then they looked at the performance impact afterwards, and it has huge positive effects on, the productivity, the engagement, by just first listening to their employees and then actually following through on that. And it's amazing. And there is in the book I talk about Best Buy as well, where like Hubert Shawley actually says the same thing. You ask the people and they will find what is like the crazy, goofiest rule that are in the way. And then from there, you can actually improve the experience of the employees. So I would start there. The other tip is like, if you think about employees are the new customer, let's take customer tools, ideation workshop. We have like processes left and right to come up with new flavors, new products, new services. Let's maybe take those and think about how can we now improve the experience of our employees. I'm actually running those workshops, like one-day workshops, where it's an ideation workshop, but about the employee experience. And I think it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, which is good. If it were easy, everybody would doing it. If it's just like handing out kind bars and installing nap pots, then everybody would do that. But it's actually hard, which is a good thing. Then you can differentiate. From
I
the
think everyone
competition.
wished it was as easy as doing that, Stephan, which is why we've seen people installing nap pods and handing out kind bars.
Exactly.
But we're realizing quickly it's actually not fixing the problem.
Exactly, Alexis. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just have ping pong tables and then we would be done?
Well, now that we've tried it, we're going to have to do better. So
yes, exactly.
But it's a great point. And I love this idea, Stephan. Two things you said that really stood out. Obviously, the first one is just listening. I think so often leaders look for a really complex silver bullet, just asking employees what some of their pain points are. And that kind of leads me to the second point you made, which is around removing the friction that employees experience in their workplace. And as someone who's worked across industries as well, and in sectors like government, where there is a lot of red tape and barriers to just getting your job done, often that I think is so frustrating when you're an ambitious, creative person and there's so many barriers in place for you doing your best work. That's so detracting to the employee experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what is important, I think, Alexis, is like, one is the listening and then is following through. We're like
Totally.
there
Yeah.
because like just listening after a while is like, well, you just wasted my time. I mean, if you're just listening
Yeah.
to me and nothing happens. And so that's kind of, you have to be devoted to be employee centric, and it's the same actually with customer centric. I've never heard there is no executive in the world who says like, I don't care about customers. There are also none who would say, I don't care about my employees. But it's like the difference is really those who are really taking that seriously and are really employee or really customer centric and follow through with what they hear after they listen and actually change something tangible.
That's such an important point, Stefan, because I think so often engagement surveys, for example, sort of get stuck in this, well, we've asked you, 100 items, and then it just sort of fades into the background and we never hear of it again. Or we do hold a session and maybe do some, brainstorming about what we could change, and then nothing comes of it. And I think when leaders don't actually have the courage to then see it through to the end, see it through to actually changing things in a tangible way, it can actually be counterproductive because people have been gone to the effort of sharing their ideas and being transparent about where their frustrations might be, and then seeing that nothing changes. And I think that is a really huge missed opportunity for leaders, and it might take some extra effort, but I think making sure that you're sort of mapping that from the outset, that you're really sort of really being very intentional about translating those insights into even just like you said, a couple of minor changes, a couple of minor rules shifting
Yeah.
can actually have a hugely transformative effect.
Yeah, no, I think like this is super important what you say, Sally, because like it then feels, if you're just listening for listening's sake, it feels a little bit like ping pong table solution.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, let's have a round table, everybody can share.
Yeah.
And no, that's not it. And like that's the
Yeah.
beginning.
Right.
Then you actually have to follow through. And to your point, then you rather don't do it. If you already know, I mean, if, those who have kids, if you like ask the kid, let's have a family, everybody can get their inputs. They will figure out pretty quickly whether you actually listen to them or it's already pre-decided what is going to happen. And then after a while, the kids are like, don't waste my time.
Right.
I mean, there's like no way why I would share it. But if you take it seriously and you have a plan, and to your point, maybe the small things where you start are could potentially make a huge difference, or at least being the beginning of a transformation.
Stefan, I have a word for this. I'd love to run it by you. I think someone who continually asks questions and does nothing with that information, we should be calling them askholes. I think
I
for me,
love
that's
this.
how it lands as well. Because when you're continually asked questions and you see no follow through, for me, it's so tokenistic and it's so manipulative. You're trying to show you're taking action, but actually you've got no follow through whatsoever. And I think it's more detrimental. And as an employee who's been on the receiving end of that, I dislike my superiors even more than if they just didn't ask at all.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
like
the
that.
word I use
I'm
to,
gonna,
to describe that.
I'm gonna borrow
You
this,
can borrow that.
Alexis asshole.
Fresh out of Australia for you. You're an asshole if you ask too many questions and do nothing about it. I think it gives people a visceral response as well. You can feel what that's
Yes.
like being on the
Yeah.
receiving end of that.
Yeah. And it also is like this sign of disrespect.
It is.
Totally.
You don't know that I realize, like it kind of shows that you actually think the other person is stupid. Well, they're not. They know.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
assholes.
I'm glad it landed for you now, Stefan. I think this has been a really helpful starting point, this idea of listening and following through. It's seemingly simplistic, yet we're obviously getting it wrong because it's not something that we see happening within organizations. And I just want to double click a little further on this. The second section of your book is around humanizing work. Can you share with us a few other key strategies or practices that you think leaders need to be using or implementing right away to create that employee first experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I talk about, like, based on the research, it shows what actually motivates humans, about those four motivators, like purpose being one, autonomy being another one, the feeling of competence, and then relatedness, or call it working together works. And I think those four are like key. Now, you can almost double click on any of those. So let me pick one. I think this notion of competence, or I call it just right tasks, is becoming more and more important. So the idea being, that what is really engaging and motivating is if we have a task that is just right for our skills. And in the book I shared the experience of my son reading and why that was so frustrating until he found the just right book. And the just right book is not a baby book, it's not too easy, but it's also not when he was 6, he wanted to read Harry Potter. He couldn't understand shit. It was very frustrating as well. Now but if you found the just right book, that was extremely motivating. Now that's a very human tendency. So we want to have like a just right task. Now the problem is a little bit it moves. Once you mastered once he read those books, it became a baby book. So you actually needed to do something new. And we know that about 40% of people, their number one reason to quit is because they don't learn something new. They're stuck. But I think the research is only about a quarter of organization actively encourage their employees to learn something new. And part of it is also that about 80% experience talent hoarding, where like the manager, doesn't want to, like, Alexis, you're like my best team member. And I want you to do this particular task for the rest of at least my working life as your boss. And I don't want you to learn something new, otherwise you're leaving. Now, the problem is you're actually leaving the organization once you're stuck. And I think thinking about what those just right tasks are, and matching it to the right is an important step. Now, I sometimes tell my executives, now that you know that, it's easy. Now you just need to figure out for all of your team members, what's the just right task? Ask it, match it to the task, and constantly update.
Yep.
And then they look at me as if I have like 7 heads. It's like, Stephan, do you know how hard that is? I have like, even if you have only 10 people, that's really difficult. And I said, that's true. But like, nowadays, actually AI can help because it sounds a little bit like an AI task, where, that's what Netflix does. Netflix figures out, Sally really likes nature documentaries,
She
drama.
does. Yeah.
Okay. So Sally really likes nature documentaries, and Alexis really likes like crime dramas. So it shows you whatever you like. Now, after a while, Alexis is like, there's no more crime dramas that are interesting. I'm actually starting to watch a little bit more of nature documentaries. And Netflix, the algorithm then is like, oh, let's switch and show her something else. And now we can use kind of the same for within organizations, and that's now what more and more organizations do with internal marketplaces, where I wrote a case on MasterCard where they use internal marketplaces, and they kind of, the employees tell, I want to learn something new. It matches it with a project within MasterCard, within the organization. I get a new experience. I learn a new skill. The platform then knows, that I have now new skills and can match me to just the right task even better. And so over time, it's those personalized experience almost that despite the fact that we might have started in the same job position, over time we actually have different experience according to what we want, how ambitious we are. And that's just one way that really, especially in a time where we're all afraid that we are not having the right skills and tasks, and it moves so fast that we're all anxious. Like, if I haven't learned something in the last week, I'm thinking like, maybe I'm going to be obsolete and in a month.
Amazing, Stefan. And we do see that for so many people, learning is a really key component of why they work, what they want from their workplace. That is such an essential aspect of, the sort of employee experience that we can offer. And what I love about this the way you framed it as almost kind of an algorithmic matching of people's needs, is that it also means we can allow for the right amount of stretch at the right time, because there might be phases of a career where people are actually perhaps new parents or whatever it is, and they don't have the bandwidth for that level of stretch at that particular moment. But by making it quite intuitive to sort of meet that need, and I think then also leaders can sort of step in where they might see that someone's sort of, just getting a little bit stuck with those nature documentaries, and maybe they could use a crime drama as well to sort
Yeah.
of create that additional stretch and having those conversations. But I think the way you've framed it also as, integrating AI means that question, which we so often get of like, oh, I already have so much to do now, I have to sort of track everyone's learning journeys. That's absolutely not the case. We can use tools to support that process.
Absolutely. We can really use technology to then humanize work even more and enhance those motivators. But it's easy to destroy it as well. We can also use technology for surveillance, for automation, so that only and so I think we have to be very careful in using technology to actually enhance motivators and not destroy it.
Amazing. Stefan, we could talk to you all day about, the employee experience and your vast, incredible research, your incredible book. We would love to finish just with perhaps one insight that you have for leaders who are feeling really excited. In addition to, buying and reading your book, what would you suggest as a starting point to really, really improve their employees, their team's experience today?
Yeah. So the reading of my book would be an amazing start. No,
We
I think
recommend it.
100%.
yeah, I do think like if leaders start to think about their employees more like customers and like think about what are the tools that I use for my customers, and then apply it for their employees. That could be listening, like the journeys, the experience that we want to creating value with our customer, but also thinking that for our employees, that's a great start. And then you can, as I mentioned before, you use the same tools, ideation workshops. And some organizations actually do that. They take the marketing team basically and to turn it inside the organization. And I think that's a great start.
I love that, Stefan, because I think what you're highlighting there is that we look to form these relationships with our customers. We really need to focus on that relationship that we have with our employees
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the employee experience, is like the equivalent of the customer experience. And that is really what drives. Maybe it's a fancy word for not phoning it in, but that's what it is. You prevent phoning it in if the employee experience is improved.
A great note to finish on there, Stefan. Thank you so much for being with us on We Are Human Leaders. It's been such a pleasure to sit down with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us at We Are Human Leaders for this incredible conversation with Stefan, really unpacking why focusing on employees, their well-being, really does create incredible outcomes at all levels. Really insightful information for all of us, whatever level we might be at. You can find out more about Stefan and his incredible work at the show notes. And you can learn more about being a part of the We Are Human Leaders movement at www.wearehumanleaders.com. As human leaders, we're seeking to lead better, live truer, and be the change we want to see in the world. And this is how we recreate workplaces and the world itself into a place where people can flourish and thrive together. We're all human first, leader second. Thank you for being a part of this movement with us. See you next time.